your weekly horoscope with Jerry and Matt.
Daddy?
Good evening, horror fans. Welcome to another edition of the Weekly Horoscope. I'm your host, Jerry, here with my partner, Matt. And Matt, with Father's Day around the corner, we thought this would be a great opportunity to look at fathers in the horror field. You and I both being fathers and loving every minute of that. Happy Father's Day in advance. But this is kind of an interesting category because it seems, and I don't know if this is a Freudian thing, but it seems horror has a greater history with mothers. Your protagonists and antagonists often tended to be men, and there seems to be that mother relationship that always gets woven into some of these stories, and there's less father-specific horror examples out there, but we got a couple really good ones, I think. What's your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I agree 100%. It's a completely different angle from a different parent figure. You know, father figures give us like the tools we need to, you know, they try to like give us positive encouragement into the world. And, you know, stories like this, where you see the father who becomes this demonstrative figure where the children just become afraid of him, almost like he's this like monster, evil type character. It's just, it's a different type of relationship. There's a very interesting line in Frailty, a movie we're going to discuss tonight, where one of the son says that God asked Abraham to sacrifice his son, and he also asked their dad to sacrifice their son, and he couldn't do it, which is an interesting allegory to the Father's Day episode, because what that story means in the Bible is that you have to sacrifice your children to the world in order to save them. So they kind of like use it backwards in the movie, but well, not really, because we'll get into the movie why, but yeah. So, I mean, there's this
Spoiler
idea
alert.
that, you don't get to keep your children. You have to, you know, if you just keep, you don't want a 35-year-old living at home, right? You have to sacrifice them out to the world. That's kind of the part of that. That's what that means. And fathers who don't do that and keep their kids like bound to them are kind of, there's an evilness to that. And so we see that in some of these movies where the fathers just don't raise their kids right.
Yeah, I think one of the being a father is the most important job you'll ever have, and B, part of that is teaching your kids to be strong, independent individuals so they can be successful adults. Yep. But not to get on a soapbox. One of the things we talk about that we enjoy here when we do these movies is the diversity within a single category. And I think this week is a great example of that, because these movies they're very prominent about fathers, and they couldn't be any more different.
Radically different. That was the one thing that went through my head the whole time is, wow, these are two different movies.
Yeah, way different. We're gonna start. We're gonna go back to the '80s for a movie called Xtro from 1982, directed by Harry Bromley Davenport, and it starts with Sam and Tony. They're playing with the dog in the backyard, and Sam is the father, and he throws a stick, and he throws it high up into the air, and when it goes up in the air, everything goes dark. All the lights go off. The power in the house goes out. They're surrounded in complete darkness, except for a single bright light in the sky. And Tony runs and hides. You know, there's wind blowing. It's like they're, you know, filming Twister all of a sudden.
Yeah, the stick explodes over the house, and suddenly it's almost like something comes down from the sky and just creates all this wind and light.
Yeah, whatever was hidden that the stick exposed is now out. And Sam disappears. The father's gone. And we jump forward 3 years later. The mom, Rachel, is living with another guy, Joe, and they have like a helper, Annalise. And Tony is still having nightmares about what happened. And actually, we see what happened through Tony's nightmare, which was kind of a cool way of introducing it.
Yeah, I like that. They almost allude to like, is this child, is he like traumatized from his dad leaving and he made it up? Because then they let the characters start believing that, like, oh, Tony's just, you know, he's suffering ththrough his dad leaving, and he made up the story in his head. Right.
I like movies. Well, we're really going to get into that with the second one, but I like movies where the truth isn't clear.
Mm-hmm.
Then we see a ship, an object, flying through the air and crashing into the woods and it just devastates the woods, and we just see fire and burning, and a creature comes out of it. And pretty cool looking creature, I thought. It's probably a suit, but it's wet and it's slimy and it's pulsing.
Yeah.
And the visage it creates is very interesting because it's almost like a human doing a reverse bear crawl, but the head's pointing the wrong way.
Yeah, like a weird grasshopper monster.
Yeah, it's a pretty disturbing image, and actually, this movie has several really cool images. My only complaint was they're like all in the first 20 minutes.
Yeah, and they also did a really good job with the sound effects. I think the sound effects made a lot of this movie like creepy and goopy, and it was just really good. Like you can hear the monster breathing, but like almost like it's breathing to like struggle to stay alive. And it's kind of creepy. Like without that sound effect, I think there would be a major difference right there. But the fact that you can just hear it breathing slowly makes it go, oh man.
Yeah, you can hear his pulsing and you hear his wetness and drippiness, and it does a good job. And the reverse bear crawl creature is just a disturbing image. It's different than anything. You want to call this alien movie an alien ripoff. They certainly went in a different direction, at least made their creature look different.
Yeah, it's got those big, lifeless demon black eyes, too. It was good.
We see a couple driving down a country road, and our creature is out in the road, and they hit it. And
the end.
Yeah, right. And the story. Of course, the creature crawls off, and they pull over, and the man goes out to see what it was, and finds it injured. And while he's leaning over it, something protrudes out of the mouth, killing the man. And then we see the creature approach the open car door, and he kills the woman. Kind of a scene with a little lack of logic. Like she leans over, and then when he grabs her, her leg is tangled in the steering wheel.
In the steering wheel, I was like, wait, how'd that happen?
Yeah, it didn't make any sense. Of course, it was British film, so the steering wheel was on the other side. But how her leg was suddenly just in completely engulfed in the steering wheel.
I hate when that happens.
Yeah. Yeah, every time I stop for
time something pulls me on my car, my foot gets stuck right.
Yeah, there's a few logic gaps here, but typical of 80s horror. This was a low budget movie, but they still do some things really well.
Again, it's a movie about an alien coming out of the sky, so we can take some liberties.
The creature, we see him go to the cottage, and we recognize the cottage that was the place where Sam first disappeared from. But there's a blonde woman there, and who we don't know. And in another pretty cool scene, he attacks her, he knocks her down, and he uses a sex-like appendage comes out of his midsection, and it instead of what you might think is going to happen, it covers her mouth, and you can see it pumping into her. And again, I thought this was a really disturbing image for the effects budget and for the era. Thought it was pretty well done.
Yeah, and they don't it's not like it comes out of the mouth and then like Alien, like how an alien was it's a strike and then it's over. Like it covers her mouth and then they show you like a good like 10 seconds of like it's like boop, 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 boop.
Something's
like pumping something, then it's like, oh, this is gross.
Yeah, very gross. We see the woman wake up. She's bloody. She's sick. She doesn't feel good, and the skin from the creature is just laying in tatters on the floor, while her dog kind of picks at it. And it's like, okay, that's nasty.
Yeah.
And very quickly she staggers to the kitchen. She's trying to clean herself up. She just doesn't feel well. Very quickly, her stomach grows to amazing size.
Yeah, like enormous,
a Volkswagen size.
Yeah, like it's like a balloon. She's like just like ballooning out.
And again, I thought the effect was pretty good. She's laying down, impressed. And the stomach is just like a dome.
Yeah,
and we see a full-grown Sam birth from her.
Yeah, just like just like Ace Ventura coming out of the fake rhinoceros, just like just coming right out. But it was gross. It was gross. And then he takes the umbilical cord and he bites it off, and they show him standing up as a full-grown man, washing himself off. Like, this is bizarre.
And he looks he looks exactly the same as when we last saw him, and only we realize he's obviously been through something.
He certainly has.
And that, the birth scene was just, I thought it was really well done for a low budget movie.
I was very impressed because I was like, that's gross. They show all sorts of stuff coming out, and I'm just like, what?
Yeah.
It's like wiping his eyes, like taking it off, like
goopy. Back at home, Tony wakes up covered in blood. Under his blankets, he's just soaked in blood. And
this movie does a lot of not explaining things, and they don't feel like they have to explain things to you, which I kind of like. I kind of appreciated that. I don't like it when they dumb down things. Like, they'll just let things happen and be like, you figure it out at the end of the movie.
Yeah, and it's, is there a symbiotic relationship between father and son?
Right.
It seems he's coming back. We'll get into this, but he's coming back for the sole purpose of getting his son. But it seems like maybe there's already a connection there.
Yeah, he's a good father.
The weird part, he cares about his boy. The weird part is they call a doctor in, and the doctor comes and says it's not his blood, which he can tell on site with a stethoscope and a little thing to check your reflexes. He can tell it's not his blood. And then he just leaves as if that answers all the questions. Why are you soaked in someone else's blood? Nobody questions that.
Well, it's funny that's as a society, we've always trusted doctors like that. In the 50s, if a doctor said smoking's good for you, we were like, yeah, the doctor said it's fine.
Yeah, I don't trust doctors.
Not anymore.
My saying is,
but for years ago we did.
You know what they call the guy who finished last in medical school? Doctor.
Yeah.
They're just human.
They're just human.
Yeah. They just, so guy, he woke up covered in blood. That's odd. And they just go about their lives.
He tasted it. He's like, this isn't his blood.
So, there's the logic just flies out, but that's okay.
Yeah. It moves the story forward. Yeah.
We see the full-grown Sam. He goes back to the couple in the woods, and he steals the man's clothes, and he steals the car, and he calls Rachel, but for some reason the phone just melts in his hand. And that's an image that they use in the preview for the film, like an example of their cool effects, and it's kind of a cool effect. I didn't really understand why it happened. Because he touches other things throughout the movie and they don't melt, but
I feel like it's like a telepathy power, like they want it to happen, because later he uses it to his advantage.
Yes.
Right. So I don't know, maybe he's just like still at that infant stage, and like throughout the movie he just like comes more fully aware of what he can do.
Yeah, could be.
Yeah, I don't know.
We see Sam. He follows Annalise is taking Tony to school. And Sam picks him up before anyone else can get there. And, the mom shows up and, I'm here to pick up Tony. Oh, his dad already picked him up. And she's like,
yeah, they show Sam, the dad, stalking Annalise and Tony walking to school in the morning. So he's like staking it out the whole time. So he knows right when to go pick him up first.
So the mom's freaking out. She's upset, but she eventually finds them together. And Sam says he is back. And kind of explains his absence by saying he didn't realize he was gone for 3 years and he doesn't know what happened.
Yeah.
And we see tensions arise in the adults as Joe, who now lives with Rachel, is a little upset that Sam is back.
Yep.
Everyone says, well, he abandoned his family. He just bailed on you. What kind of guy is this? So this automatic tension is creating, but Rachel wants Sam back in Tony's life. Tony wants his dad very badly.
Yeah. And I mean, he's moved Joe has moved into their old house, and Sam's like, no, this was my house before I disappeared. Like, you know what I mean? Like, so yeah, there's this immediate tension. And like Joe is like, he's a photographer, and he was kind of just doing like lighthearted stuff. And like, she walks in one day and she's like, oh, you're doing this kind of shoots again? And like the girl's all kind of pinned up, and he's like, yeah, I've changed my mind. Like, he's kind of doing it bitterly, Now
Yeah.
it's like, oh, if you're going to have this guy around, I'm going to do risque pictures again. You know?
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. We see Tony has a pet snake, and we see Sam. There's eggs in the enclosure, and he's picking up and eating the eggs from the pet snake, and that's very gross. And
Yeah, they
Tony,
made that real gross. It was like all blue, like he's like using his hands, and it's all goopy down his cheeks. And I was like, ugh.
Yeah, very gross. For 1982, this was a pretty gross movie.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, but it also doesn't come off as like this. Like it's just it has like a regular soap opera tone, and then these like really gross scenes, like superimposed with it. It was interesting how they did it.
Exactly. Yes, I agree. If you cut out the gore and the weird scenes, this could be an after
It's a
TV
soap
special.
opera. Yeah.
Tony walks in and sees his dad eating the snake eggs and sees all the grossness that you just described, and he freaks out and runs away. And Sam catches him, and he tells him that I need him, and I'm different now, and I was taken to another world. And Tony says, well, why did you come back? And he says, I came back for you. Like you said, the father wants his boy back.
Yep.
And then he uses his mouth. He kisses Tony on the shoulder, but uses his mouth to implant something in Tony.
Yeah, it's like he's injecting him with something too. He's like, "Come here." He goes to give him a hug and just starts like injecting his shoulder with something. And they show that too. It's like all of a sudden it starts bubbling up on his shoulder and getting bigger and bigger.
And Tony receives it, and he doesn't seem to be upset or be freaking out about it at all.
Yeah.
While this is happening, the snake escapes from the enclosure, which is weird because it's the same enclosure he's always in, and all that happened was somebody took his eggs. So that freaked him out enough to climb over the top, apparently.
Yeah. Snakes are crafty.
Yeah. Yes, evil. At dinner, the adults start fighting again as Joe tells everyone that him and Rachel are getting married. And Sam throws like a wine bottle at him. And, there's just creates this more tension just boiling over. Like Joe is trying to establish that he's the man now.
Yeah. They get into this little temporary fight, and he's like, Joe stands up. It's like, you crazy. And then all of a sudden you hear Tony like crying for his dad, and that like diffuses the tension right away.
Yeah, well, because while this is happening, Tony is in bed, and he's making a top spin all by itself.
Yeah.
And he gets freaked out a little bit. So when dad comes in, he tells him that you can now control things with your mind if you concentrate.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, oh, where'd this ability come from?
And that's what made me think that maybe he made the snake come out of the cage. Because earlier when he's playing with the snake, the mom gets mad and says, put that thing back in its cage. I don't want it here in the kitchen. So I think maybe that was the first time that Tony used his ability without even realizing it, because they're talking about the eggs. And so while the son is thinking about the snake, it escapes because he had him use that power. Like he had that telepathy.
The snake crawls through, ends up coming out the light fixture, and the lady in the apartment downstairs, and falls into her salad. And she comes over and starts to toss the salad, and the snake comes out, and she kills it. She grabs like a meat tenderizer and just pounds the heck out of it.
Yeah.
And good, which is exactly what I would do. But
it's a natural reaction. Yeah, I would do the same. Just grab the first thing you see and just start wailing.
she brings it back to the family in a bag, all mangled and smashed up. And obviously Tony's a little bit upset, and he goes to bed crying. But that night he makes his toys come alive, and he's got this weird clown that he brings to life.
Yeah.
And the lady downstairs is pounding on the ceiling to be quiet. Now, this is the lady who just killed his snake. He takes one of his toy soldiers and makes him come to life and sends him to kill her.
Yeah. I was actually really impressed with this whole scene right here for 1982, because it's goofy and silly, but like murderous. And like I thought like the whole costume was like, this is actually kind of cool that they did this. Like it could have been a lot worse, but
Yeah,
It
it's a
was
little cheesy, but
it's cheesy on purpose though. Like, you know what I mean?
it's
Like
unique.
it's yeah, it's very unique. It has to look like a giant toy,
Yeah,
right? But it's also this thing's gonna murder you and kill you. And it was interesting.
the toy ends up stabbing her with his bayonet end on his rifle.
Yeah, like she's trying to hide through the couch, and it's just like poking, and there's just blood splurting everywhere. Like I
Yeah,
was like, oh, that's pretty evil. Just this
yeah.
smiling, like lifeless toy, that's just like coming in there to kill her.
The length of the bayonet was not longer than the width of the couch, but
It was not.
still he was stabbing her and
She
blood
was
flying
hiding. She
everywhere.
had to have been hiding in the cushions for that to have
Yeah,
worked.
exactly. Exactly. I love that nobody in the 80s ever thought about any logic connection in the
Yeah,
movies,
they
but
didn't have the budget for logic. They were like, listen. Although
that's
all they had to do was give him a bigger bayonet.
Rachel tells Joe that she is taking Sam back to the cottage to see if she can trigger some memories. That's where he disappeared from. He still says he doesn't know where he's been, what happened. Joe is obviously not happy with this scenario, and Tony is staying with Annalise. But Annalise, while babysitting, sneaks her lover in.
Yep.
And this creates issues because Tony's clown attacks Annalise, and in another, I thought, very funny scene, he's got a rubber hammer. When he holds it up, it droops,
It goes warm.
but he still swings it, and he still knocks her out with it.
Yeah, well, he looks over when it flops down. He looks over at Tony, and they both just shrug their shoulders, and he goes, "Whatever," and then just goes to do it anyways.
Yeah, and he knocks her out with the rubber hammer, which is kind of funny. But it's the humor in here. It's not like front and center, but there are some humorous little tidbits stuck in there.
Like when Annalise has the boyfriend come over, and she goes to Tony and says, "Hey, I'm going to go in my room and lay down." Tony's like, "You're always going in your room to lay down." It's kind of like a little,
yeah, exactly.
She always does this, kind of.
Well, she's out cold, and Tony puts his mouth on her stomach and is doing the pumping stuff into her.
Yeah.
You see the veins swell and they turn blue, and they kind of map their way across.
They're spreading.
Stomach,
yeah,
and
you can see it.
Yeah. And they pulse, and it's pretty cool.
Yeah, hats off to the special effects in this movie for sure. They did a really good job.
The lover comes looking for her, and a toy tank is shooting at him. So he starts running, and he ends up. He finds Annalise. She's cocooned to a wall, like completely like a spider's trapped.
Spider web. Yeah.
And her growing stomach is pulsing. He freaks out and he runs out, and a Black Panther jumps at him. And we don't see what happened. We assume the Black Panther killed him, but we don't ever see a body.
And jumps at the camera. Yeah. And at this point in the movie, you're just willing to accept anything they throw at you now. So you're like, okay.
Yeah. And now we see the clown, and this is kind of a gross scene. He is pulling black eggs from an elephant trunk-like appendage that's coming out of the cocoon.
Yeah, and they're like jelly, like fish eggs, but they're huge, like softballs.
Yeah, and pulsing, of course. Everything pulses.
Yeah.
Back at the cabin, Sam and Rachel actually share a kiss. And she kind of, wait a minute, what am I doing here? What am I doing? And she wants to check on Tony. She calls home, but nobody answers. So she calls a neighbor.
The clown picks up, and then he rips the phone out.
Right. Yeah. The clown answers but doesn't say anything. Right.
Yeah.
So she calls a neighbor to check in. The neighbor gets on the elevator, and this is a man we hadn't met before. And the lights go out, the elevator stops, and his throat gets cut by a spinning light disc, like a little kid's
yo-yo.
Dreidel.
It's the dreidel he was playing with earlier.
The top that was spinning. Okay.
The top, yeah, he used that, and it cuts his neck. Somehow it has a blade on it.
It flies through the air and just a neat little slice across the throat, and no more neighbor.
Yeah, reminded me of the Phantasm.
The clown and Tony are just completely destroying the house. Everything's just a mess. They have everything like knocked over. They're spilling.
They knocked the fridge
everywhere.
over. They put a bunch of green goop in there. They're putting the eggs in the green goop in the fridge. And at this point, I'm just like, I don't know what's going on.
Yeah. And the clown is just so oddly out of place.
Yeah.
But kind of funny.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's like everything seems to be like it's like, well, he's there's the clown, and then there's the panther, and then there's it's like all, I guess, figments of the child's imagination, right? So
Yeah.
it's this all has to come from a child's mind. So I
Yeah.
think that's
Toys
kind
he
of where
brought to life
kind of
that he uses now.
right.
Yeah.
That's the direction they're taking it. Yeah.
So when Rachel doesn't hear back from the neighbor, she calls Joe and says, "Hey, can you go check?" And she hangs up, and Sam reaches over behind her where she can't see and melts the phone line, like you were talking about, where he uses this power because he doesn't want anybody to discover them there. So Joe goes to the house. He picks up Tony and heads to the cottage. When they get there, Rachel is sleeping, which is another, big
She went from being on the phone concerned to now
Yeah.
she's just lying in bed, like, okay, I'm gonna
Panicked,
sleep now.
don't know where my son is, don't know what's happening, completely, at her wit's end, and is now sleeping.
Yeah.
Doesn't make sense.
Yeah, there's certainly some inconsistencies in the story in this movie. They kind of just put things together like that, but
That's it. Yeah, it's all right.
yeah.
Sam gets into bed with her and starts having sex with her. Traditional, not mouth, not elephant appendage, just regular. Seems like straight
traditional
up.
missionary married couple happy.
Yeah. She reaches over and turns on the light and sees his skin is coming apart, and almost in a Terminator-esque manner, his skin's coming apart, and it looks like colors are melting through.
Yeah, there's like green, black, red, and it's just all. It kind of looks like he's like painted with goo, and
Yeah. It was unique, of course. Yeah.
It was pretty gross. I was like, oh, the green. I can handle blood, but green.
Yeah, and it was like a second skin underneath, but it was goopy and runny. It looked like melted crayons, is all I could think of.
Yeah.
So he's changing, and he pushes her away. And at this point, Joe arrives with Tony, and he runs in for Rachel. And she says, "We got to get out of here. Let's go." He says, "Well, Tony's in the car," but Tony's not in the car. We see Tony holding hands and walking into the woods with his father.
Yeah, and there's like this really bright light into the forest, and they're kind of walking into the forest.
Yeah, so they're kind of like silhouetted by the light, and it's they're holding hands, and it's it's a Father's Day movie. It's a tender moment between father and son.
Right.
So they give chase after, and they're trying to get the boy back, and Sam stops, and he screeches like this blood curdling sound, and he just keeps going, and Joe grabs his head, and his ears start bleeding, and then he just collapses on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
And whatever that screech was, it took out Joe.
Yeah, it killed him because the wife comes over to check on him, rolls his body over, and he's just dead.
Gone. Yep. And the father and son walk together in the bright light. And at this point, we get a view of Sam is fully changed.
Yep.
He's completely a tall, thin, wiry alien.
Yep. Yeah, with you can see his jaw and the teeth and the cheekbones and everything, almost very reminiscent to the original monster that crashed, but a more fully developed version of that.
Yes. And we see Tony is starting to change as well.
Yeah.
And they hold hands and just disappear into the bright light, and the light is gone. And Rachel is left in an empty field, wondering what just happened.
Yeah, so are we.
Yes. She ends up going home, and when she gets to the house, it's lit up in bright light for some reason. And the panther's walking around.
Still there. No one took care of him.
In the sink or in the fridge is the black pulsing eggs. And she picks one up, and she's holding it. And an appendage shoots out of it right to her mouth, and she drops.
Yeah.
And it was kind of a cool ending because, everything from Halloween on had to end with the opportunity for a sequel.
Yeah.
and this certainly did. I think there's been two more of these, but
Oh, has it? Yeah, because then you see the door shut, and like it's like, yeah, then the kid hits right to the credits. But like you see, like the that alien thing is like on the ground, like like it's like bursted out of the sack, and it's like this like a bagpipe of like organs, and it's like pumping stuff into her or something, and then the door just shuts, and that's it.
So we know at this point the father and son left together, happy to be reunited.
Happy ending. Yep.
We get a glimpse. The boy was playing with his dad out back, and the mother was busy. We got the very brief impression that he had a much better relationship with his father than he did with his mother.
Yeah.
Not that that's the point or anything, but you can see why he missed his dad and wanted.
He was
to go
longing
back
for him. Yeah, they mentioned it. Like, how could he remember these things from 3 years ago? How is he not over it? Like they mentioned that he just really is grieving and missing his father.
And we know that this alien life form still exists in the eggs, now in Rachel, and in the sac pumping into her. So we're left with like, okay, that's the end of this story. And so this story really concludes with the father-son being reunited, which is why it was a perfect Father's Day movie.
Yes, I agreed. Other than that, I have no idea what was happening in this movie.
There was a lot of confusing things at some point. I don't think the filmmakers knew what was going on, but
right. But other than that, it's a fun film.
Yeah, it's pretty entertaining movie. It's not high art by any stretch,
nope,
but
it doesn't even try to be.
With a low budget, their effects were good. The acting was good. Even
it was.
They were smart, and I think this probably predates when we started to see phenomenal kid actors all over the place.
Yeah,
they were smart in being very selective in how they used Tony. So there's not one scene you can point to and say, "Oh my God, the kid actor really butchered that."
Yeah, that's a good point. Actually, there's no real like scenes where he's like trying to be this child star actor. He's kind of they just use him small here and there in little ways.
Yeah, do this and do it, and he did it well. So the acting was good. I thought everything was really good. A couple logic flaws, but all in all, pretty good movie.
I agree.
All right, so our second film for Father's Day horror is Frailty, from 2002. Directed by Bill Paxton, and to me, this is a extremely underrated and undermentioned movie. This is one of my favorite movies of all time, and it's strange because it's not action packed, it's not blood and guts, it's not all the things I usually gravitate to, but this is just a beautifully done movie.
It's incredible. I mean, the great Bill Paxton. This is the second movie we've done from him. The first one, what was the
Near Dark?
first one? Near Dark, yes. Yeah. Near Dark was great, and so now we have another one. And he's done he did Brain Damage as well. I mean, he's been in a bunch of good horror movies. But yeah, I think he crushed it in this movie.
He is he only directed 2 feature films. This and The Greatest Game Ever Played, which is in a completely different category.
Yeah. He has a big range. Bill Paxton, he has a huge range.
Obviously gone way too soon, but a quick note about Bill Paxton. He is the only actor ever to be killed by an alien, a predator, a Terminator, the Grim Reaper, and a serial killer.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Which is pretty cool.
Yeah, he's one of the best to ever do it. He was a phenomenal actor. I love his movies.
Very, very underrated. And he did a heck of a job directing this movie.
Yes.
This movie, we start at FBI headquarters in Dallas, Texas, and a man shows up at night claiming he has info on the God's Hand killer, and he'll only speak to the agent in charge of the case.
The Great Powers Booth.
The Great Powers Booth. And the man who shows up claims he is Fenton Meeks and that his brother is the killer. And Fenton Meeks is Matthew McConaughey, who prior to this, I always considered kind of a bubblegum actor, like doing those swashbuckling action movies with his shirt off.
Yep.
But he is so understated and phenomenal in this movie. I really came to look at him in a different light, and he's gone on to become a more distinguished actor. He's amazing in this.
Yeah, he changed tones in his career. He started off he was typecast a lot, and that's where the money was. But as he was able to make more decisions in his career, you could see Matthew McConaughey taking a lot of cool scripts. He did a lot of cool things.
For me, this was the first movie where I went, holy cow, he can get it done.
Yep.
He can get it done. He says that he got a call from his brother the night before, and that his brother had killed himself. And Fenton stole an ambulance and his brother's body and buried him in the rose garden as he promised. And so he's telling this all to Powers Booth's character inside the FBI office.
Detective Doyle, I think it is.
Yeah, Wesley Doyle.
Yep.
And so he starts to explain it, and he said, "Well, let me tell you the whole thing." And his voice is perfect in how he delivers this. But
yeah,
the tale goes back to him as a young boy with his brother, two young boys, and a single dad, which is Bill Paxton.
Yeah.
And they have a very simple but very good life. He is a very attentive and caring father. He works long days. The boys kind of take care of each other. He comes home and there's, the oldest Fenton cooks dinner.
Yeah,
and they have a meal together. But
the dad wants to help out with the homework, and they seem like they're just like, the mother had died giving birth to Adam, and they're all just kind of hanging in there together. You can just feel like this family has love, even though that they've suffered a great loss, and they're just working hard. He's a mechanic, like you said, and it's kind of wholesome.
Yeah, and he says he describes it as we only had each other, but it was enough. Yeah. And you really get that vibe. They really do a nostalgia vibe to it that's very heartwarming.
Yeah, it's very well done.
Except one night, the father comes into the room, and wakes up the boys in the middle of the night, and tells them that he was visited by God, and that they have been chosen to have a special purpose. That there are demons in the world, and they have been selected to destroy them, and that God will send them 3 weapons to aid them in their quest, and they're not to tell anyone.
Yeah.
And Fenton is immediately skeptical.
Yeah, he keeps rushing in at the middle of the night. Like they go from the character. You see the character development immediately. Like he's sitting down at night having a beer with his kids, having dinner, just being a normal dad. And then later that night, it's midnight, and he comes rushing in like bug-eyed. Like, I just had a vision from God, and like the one son believes him, and the other son's like, wait, what? Like, and like you can see the father's transformation immediately. Like something happened.
Yeah, the younger son is maybe that youth gives him. He's a little more naive, and it's his dad. Why wouldn't he believe him? Your parents know everything when you're young.
Why would dad lie to us? Yeah.
Fenton's a little bit older and says, wait a minute, this seems bogus to me.
Right. He's getting older. He's more of a teenager. He sees people for being people, and he's like, this is how crazy people act. Right.
Exactly. Which is what most of us would think, right?
Yep.
We see dad driving to work, and he sees a bright light out of the sky, and it points right to a barn. And he drives to the barn, and he sees an axe lit up by the light, and the axe says Otis on the handle. And later on, he acquires a lead pipe and some gloves. And
it's interesting. He brings in this cloth, and he's like, look at this. Like, and he kneels down to the coffee table, and he opens up the cloth, and it's just a lead pipe.
Yeah.
Like, and his son looks at him like, dude, really?
This was sent from God. And he's
right.
Like, it's like a lead
we have
pipe.
Those in our garage. Like,
you look like a thug.
Right.
And at work, an angel visits him. He's underneath working on a car, laying on the ground. And the engine and the undercarriage all disappear, and an angel descends to him.
I thought this was a really cool scene, the way it was filmed. Like you said, like the undercarriage and muffler like starts to morph into a cathedral, and like the angel comes down with a sword of fire, and all of a sudden it pans back, and you see some guy next to him working on, like, he's like welding something, so sparks are flying everywhere, and you can hear people talking like it's normal. Like, it's like, no, this guy's just down here hallucinating. And then it goes right back into his vision, like into his world. I thought that was such a great shot.
And the best part about this movie, and I talked about it when we were doing the last movie, is you spend the whole movie not knowing what's real.
Right.
Or
most
of the movie not knowing what's real.
It's phenomenal the way they do it.
And like the angel visit, that was hard to pull off without being cheesy.
Yeah. Yeah,
you know what I'm saying? He's laying under a car, and all of a sudden, an angel descends. Lit by light, and he gives him names.
Does he have a tumor and he's having some weird hallucination at work, or is this really happening and he's telling the truth? They just show you what he's seeing. They don't tell you if it's true or not.
He immediately gets out from under the car and starts writing down the names.
Yep.
And he goes home. He's like, boys, we got our list. And Fenton's like, those are people, Dad. And he's like, they look like people, but they're demons. And he explains that the gloves were so when they take the people, they use the gloves. But when we get them back here, I take the gloves off and I can touch them and see them for who they really are.
Yeah, almost like this like seizure-esque thing that happens, like the transfer of power, you know?
Yeah. And Fenton at this point decides he needs to stop him. He doesn't know how. He's a young kid, but
yeah, he's like, I want to call the cops, but it's my dad and I love him, so I got to figure something out. And he can't even do that. He's kind of afraid to do that.
So one night the father doesn't come home. The kids put themselves to bed. They're pretty self-sufficient, as we mentioned. They do the dinner and the dishes and all that, anyways. And the boys are arguing over it. And Fenton thinks they need to run away, but Adam doesn't want to. And lo and behold, the dad comes home in the middle of the night. And they see him out the window, and he's carrying a body wrapped up in plastic into the shed. The boys run out, and the plastic's off, and we see he's got a woman tied up, and she's got makeup smeared all over, and we're like, okay, this is now it's getting real. He takes the gloves off and he touches her, and his body is like he touched electricity.
Yeah,
he's shaking and there's noise and like the room seems to shake. It's all very like,
it's intense. Yeah, they make it seem like, oh, this is happening, like, but then you're kind of like there's like this meta part that goes, is he just psycho and making this up? And
then he finally backs away from her. His hand comes off of her, and he's got this great like
astonishment.
Astonished, shocked look on his face, and says, well, she's a demon, boys. And he takes his trusty Otis axe and he kills her.
Yep.
Right in front of the boys. And together, and he wants them in on it. He said, this is
you're going to sit there and watch this. These are demons. Yeah.
And together they bury the body in the rose garden that they live next to. So we go back to the adult Fenton.
And he makes the kid always makes the kids bury the dig the ditch while he just sits there and smokes cigarettes, and he'll just sit there like, you guys don't realize what that was a demon. You don't know what I saw. Someday you'll see it, and they have to like bury the ditches. And it's just this weird
and Adam
hierarchy.
says, I saw it, Dad. And Fenton's like, no, you didn't. Like,
you're just going along with this. Yeah.
Yeah. So back, the adult Fenton tells the FBI agent Doyle that the bodies that he's looking for from the God's Hand Killer are buried there. So, and this is like a 2-hour drive or more. No, it was 200 miles, I think.
200 miles. He said 200 miles west. Yeah. Because they were from Thurman. Yeah.
Yeah. So they get in the car. They get in the FBI car. Agent Doyle's driving, and he resumes the tale from the back of the car. And he tells that his dad buys a van and has the boys go with him for his next victim.
Got windows boarded up on it. It's like just like what is this? Yeah.
It's the free candy, don't come near it van that you would expect, right?
Yes.
But he makes the kids help him, and he makes specifically Fenton lure a guy to trap him, and he does. Fenton doesn't want to. He's crying, but he makes him do him, and he says, "This is a child killer."
Yeah, and he's like, he's like, it's the middle of the day. He's like, listen, God is going to protect us and blind people. They won't see what we're doing. He's like, not even cameras will catch us.
Yeah, he's like, we're in the parking lot in the middle of the broad daylight.
Yeah,
but they get him and they kill him and they bury him. And now Fenton really says, we got to run away. But he won't leave Adam, and Adam won't leave. He believes his father, and he says, I saw it. He's a demon.
Yeah.
So Adam tells on Fenton. He tells his dad that, Fenton wants to run away. He doesn't believe you.
Yeah.
And the dad makes him dig a huge hole.
Yeah. It's a 10 by 15 foot hole in the backyard. And I love the child Fenton, like the response he goes like, what? Like out of complete disbelief. And I thought that was his acting moment right there, because I was thinking the same thing. I was like,
Yeah.
what? But
Yeah.
he did a good job right there. I like that scene.
Well, yeah, we get in movies usually, people dig graves in like 5 minutes, and like that's a lot of digging.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
a lot of work.
Yeah. He tells me he wants half of it done by the end of the day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He doesn't use
He's
any
like,
gloves.
he's like, I can't have half this done by the end of the day. And Bill Paxton walks away going, well, then pray about it. And I was like, man, it was a well written movie.
Yeah, it really was.
It's just because the whole thing speaks to child, like fatherly child abuse, like how an abusive father would act to their son, like unrelenting, unreasonable punishments, unreasonable expectations for your kids, and then being abusive on top of it. And I thought that's kind of the core of a lot of child abuse that people suffer, like growing up. And they just kind of they put that as the undertone for this movie.
And Fenton at this point becomes defiant, and he
he
gets like a chip on his shoulder.
You see that,
and he's angry, and he's like, and he starts digging. He's like, I'll dig your effing hole,
and I won't pray,
and I'm not. Yeah. And when he has a great line, and Matthew McConaughey delivers it as he finished it. He said, "I dug that hole as deep and as dark as my hatred for his God."
Yes.
And it was, I'm like, oh, what a great line. And he delivered it perfectly.
Yep, I agree. Yeah, this whole movie's written awesome.
That night he brings home another demon. And then in between, it's you talk about like an abusive father, and I'm not excusing what he does, but when he comes inside, he's like, oh, you should have wore gloves. Your hands are, let me bandage them. Let me put stuff on. He's like, I'm not punishing you, son. I want you to see the truth. And he's back to the father we met at the beginning, where he loves his boys. He just wants Fenton in this with him.
Yeah, that was a powerful scene. I really, it was very incredible, because he comes in concerned, like, hey man, what's wrong with you? What's going on? Why are you all grumpy eating dinner? And he's like, are you serious? You just had me out there like digging for like 8 hours. What do you mean? What's wrong with me? And he's like, hey man, relax. He's like, tell him, relax. I just want you to understand what's going on here. I want you, part, like you said, part of this. And I was like, oh man, they just nailed it with like that manipulative, abusive father who will do something cruel and then go, hey man, I love you. That's why I'm doing this. Like it just totally plays in the manipulation of the children. And I thought they knocked it out the park.
Yeah. So this demon, he expects Fenton to kill it. And instead Fenton takes off, and he runs all the way into town to the sheriff's office, and he's banging on the sheriff's door at night. And, small town where the sheriff lives behind the sheriff office kind of deal.
Yeah, and he's a mechanic, so Fenton's dad's a mechanic, so obviously he knows the local sheriff. And
yeah, sure. The sheriff doesn't believe him, but is going to bring him home and basically say, I'm going to tell your dad about this. And he's like, no, you can't. He's like, I'll show you. It's right there. And he's so adamant that the sheriff doesn't believe him, but he says, I got to take a look.
Yeah. So and they almost have that attitude of like, keep your mouth shut, boy. Like we're the adults are talking. We don't need you going around spreading these rumors because you're in trouble. Yeah. Yeah,
and kids are often not believed, and sometimes they should be. Mm-hmm. So when he's brought down to the new basement that Fenton dug, the father kills him.
Yeah, just
hits him with an axe.
Yep.
And he immediately turns and vomits. And he's sick, and he's almost in tears, and he's sick from killing a man. And Fenton's like, you kill people all the time. And he's like, I destroyed demons.
I've never killed anybody. What are you
never
talking
killed
about?
A man before.
And the whole time they're having this conversation, young Fenton is burying, he's digging the ditch.
Yeah. And the dad tells Fenton that the angel told him that Fenton was a demon, but he didn't want to believe him. He refused to believe. And at this point, he locks Fenton in the cellar, and he says, you're going to stay in there until you have faith. And, he's screaming and crying, and we find him passed out on the stairs. Yeah. And Adam starts bringing him sips of water through a hole, and that's it. All he's getting is, and he said, Dad, so I can bring you 1 cup a day. And that's it, but I'll try to sneak you more if I can.
Yeah, if you take someone and you put them in a hole and deprive them of sensory and food and nutrition, they're eventually going to talk to God.
Yeah.
You're going to
Well,
see something. You're going to hallucinate.
so 1 week later, so he's in this hole for a week with nothing but a cup of water a day. The father opens the trap door and says, has God spoken to you yet? And he looks up very weak at this point and he says, there is no God. And he slams it back down and locks him back in.
And nails it.
And Fenton describes it as many days go by. Doesn't know how many.
Lost track. Yeah.
Passing out. Finally, he passes out completely where he's unresponsive. And they grab him and bring him out of the hole. And his father's carrying him and loving on him and concerned for him. And
yeah,
it's weird. And I get what you're saying about being manipulative. And it's so well done because that was how he was at the beginning.
Right.
So is it the duality within him or
well, there's two things going on. I think what they're doing with this movie, and part of that's the genius of it, is that there's the meta comparison of like the abuse that a father will do, the types of tricks and manipulation that can occur in child abuse. And there's also the actual story of what's going on, which we'll find out at some point later as we get further into it. Yeah. And so they kind of use both of those as a measure. I think that's why it's done brilliantly.
It is.
Yeah.
Even though I know all these things now, after seeing the movie, I still enjoy. I've seen it
executed well
several times. Acting's great. Story's just fantastic.
Yep.
And he tells me, I just wanted you to see God's light. And now when Fenton comes to, he says, he saw God. He spoke to me, and I understand now. And the father is so happy. And now Fenton is in. He's going with him. He helps him subdue the next demon. In fact, they have a slip up, and the next demon, hits the dad in the ribs with a crowbar, and Fenton knocks him out. He's in, right? He's fully invested. He's a demon slayer, just like his dad.
Yeah.
When they get back in the cellar, the dad gives him the axe to finish off the demon they just got, and he rears it back, and he swings, and as he does, he turns and buries it right into his father's chest.
Yep. And he falls down, and then Adam runs to him like, "What did you do?" Yeah.
Another piece of great acting from Bill Paxton. In his face at that time, you can see acceptance, you can see love for his son, you can see fear. He emotes it beautifully, I thought.
Yeah. It's one of the best actors.
And then Adam grabs the axe, pulls it out, and runs over and kills the demon. So he finishes the job as Dad laid it out. And together the boys go bury the bodies in the rose garden as they've been doing.
And it goes right back to him in the car, and he's explaining to Doyle, he's like, so what we did was we told the cops, we went to the cops next day and says Dad never came home. And they ended up splitting them up into orphanages, and they never told anyone. They never got in trouble for it. The
last thing Fenton tells Adam is that if he ever destroys him, to bury him there.
Yep.
That kind of brings us full circle to how at this point they're there.
Back to the original scene of the movie, right? Brings us right back. Yeah.
At this point, they're at the rose garden, and they're walking. It's dark. It's middle of the night, and it's pouring rain. And Fenton starts asking Doyle questions about his mom, because he had one picture on his desk back at the FBI. Mm-hmm. And when he tells him that, Fenton told Adams that if he ever destroyed him, to bury him there. And Doyle says, well, how does this make sense? And he says, well, it would all make sense to you if the man standing in front of you was Adam.
Yeah.
And at this point, it's revealed that he's not Fenton.
Right. It's like the whole that moment of, oh my God, yeah, the whole movie twists in your brain at that point. You're like, oh, wait a second.
Yeah. And he starts asking Doyle and Doyle pulls his gun on him. And it's like, what are you pulling here? And he asks him about his own murdered mother. And then he grabs his arm, and we see a flashback to Agent Doyle killing his own mother.
Yeah.
And at this point, Adam is now overwhelming Agent Doyle,
Yeah.
and he's going to destroy him as he
Yeah.
is a demon.
Yeah, he's like, how did you know? And he's like, you were on my list.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we find out that Adam couldn't destroy Fenton.
Yeah.
Fenton, who grew up to become a serial killer, but Adam couldn't destroy him until God put him on the list. So he ended up on the same list as Agent Doyle.
Mm-hmm.
He kills him with the trusty Otis axe and buries him. And now at this point, we flash back, and they always, walk this line between, is the dad crazy? Is this true? Do you believe the religious spin on it? Is this a mental illness? Is Adam just following along because, it's his father? But they flash back to what Adam saw whenever the father touched him. And we see the woman is a killer. We see
yes, there's a guy. She's in bed next to a guy with his throat cut, and then we see that old guy come up, and he's like a pedophile. He's going to take his kid,
child killer, child molester, and it's like, okay, so everything the father said was true. Is what you're now led down that road.
And even Adam finding Agent Doyle and saying you murdered your wife, like, and he's like, how did you know? Like, no one ever knew. And he's like, because you're on my list. Like,
So we go back to the FBI, and despite a handful of people being at the office, including one particular agent who brought him in, no one can remember what the visitor looked like.
They pull up some video footage, and coincidentally, it's all disrupted, and you can't get a look on his face.
It's all static. It's all line. It's like an old VHS tape.
Everyone's been blinded
out of adjustment.
Yep. Yeah. Exactly.
And it's you go back to what the father said about God will protect us. Nobody will see us.
Yeah.
So that FBI agent goes to visit the town sheriff, kind of to wrap things up, and that town sheriff happens to be Adam. He has no recollection of seeing him before. He's the guy who brought him into the building and set him down.
Yep.
As they part, Adam shakes his hand and says, "You're a good man."
Yeah.
And we're left with like, holy crap, this whole thing was true.
And the woman comes out to kind of embrace him, and like they kind of like hug and hold hands. And it's the woman who was originally on the line that said he stole the ambulance when Doyle called up the station. So it's his wife. It's his wife who's now in on it and believes it.
Yeah, the wife answers the phone at the sheriff's office so she can guide this wherever it needs to go.
Yep.
And you're left going, wow, because the whole movie you don't know what to believe.
Yeah. Well, the whole movie you just think the dad's a psycho. Right?
Now it's asking you to believe, and it's like, holy crap! Yeah. It was just so well done, as for all the reasons.
It's a phenomenal movie,
about, but
phenomenal movie. Yeah.
Way underrated. But the dynamic between Bill Paxton and his kids is the core of the movie, and makes this a perfect movie for Father's Day. And you could say this isn't really a horror movie. It's horror adjacent, perhaps. It's more of a thriller. But they're axing people in front of kids, and it definitely goes down.
That's elements of horror right there. If that's right, if you're axing people in the face right in front of your kids and telling them you're doing it for God, that's a horrific thing. So I'll put that right in any horror genre.
So I had no problem including this and it's also perfect for the Father's Day.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and now you look back and you get a new perspective, I think, on Bill Paxton's character, because if all this was true,
then he was a good father.
He really was that great father we saw at the beginning.
And not just that, but he's a saint from God. He's killing demons.
He's an agent. He's an agent of God, and
he's an agent of God. Yeah.
All he was really trying to do was save Fenton, who was not going to be part of this because Fenton was evil.
Yeah, right. And which he was. He said, "Hey, the angel told me that you were a demon, but I won't believe him because you're my son and I love you." And then we find out later that he was.
So, Bill Paxton was a great father in this movie, despite some of the punishments that he doled out. And
he was bad at communicating. He probably could have went about it a better way.
Sure. But an excellent movie and a perfect Father's Day movie, and I think our choices here were very good. I think they fit the category perfectly, and it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I agree. If you want to watch any Father's Day movies this weekend, we suggest these two.
Absolutely. Well, that wraps up our show for this week. We appreciate you listening. As always, we'll be back next week with another episode. This is the Weekly Horoscope. I'm Jerry. That is Matt. Have a good one.
Have a good one. Thank you, everyone.
Your weekly horoscope with Jerry and Matt.